My friends, for seminar number 216, mounted by the Centre for Global Higher Education. And it's a pleasure to welcome back Professor Marek Kwiek for his third webinar on global science. And the other two were well attended, and I expect we'll have a few people in today as well, Marek. Before I reintroduce you, and I'm sure some people will remember the bio from last time, let me take you through the webinar protocols, folks. Webinar is being recorded and will be posted online on the CGHE website in due course. It goes onto YouTube. It's usually up within 24 hours or so. Trevor's pretty quick. Transcript of the chat function conversation will also be posted on our website. Now, please keep yourself muted unless you have been asked to speak or asking a question. And there's no need to have your video on either during the webinar. But of course, we advise you to turn it and your audio on when you're actually active in the webinar. We recommend using speaker view so you can more clearly see who is talking at any given moment. Now, to ask a question or make a statement during the webinar after the speaker is finished, you use the chat function. First, you post your thought or your question in the chat, and then I'll be able to select you into the webinar from there. We compose the Q&A on the basis of relevance. And also speed, because if you come in early, you're pretty likely to be part of the conversation. Whereas if you post your great question at 5 to 3 o'clock UK time, then you may run the risk of missing out altogether. So as I always say, come in early. And as of course, what always happens is that people don't come in early, but when they do come in early, they certainly help to shape the discussion initially. It's a good idea to come in early. When you're invited to ask your question during the Q&A, you please unmute yourself, switch on your video, and then introduce yourself, state your name and where you are from. Okay, it's a pleasure to come back to our speaker for today. His topic is the globalization of science, and he's looking at what he, and I think I and others would argue, is the increasing power of individual scientists in the global science system. And with an interesting conundrum, as Carolyn Wagner and colleagues called it, for national governments. Marek Kwiek is the shareholder of UNESCO Chair in Institutional Research and Higher Education Policy, Director of the Institute for Advanced Studies in Social Sciences and Humanities at the University of Poznan, Poland. I think fair to say, Marek, you're Poland's leading scholar of higher education and science, very well known in the global literature, a prolific and original publisher of his research findings. Has done much, I think, to advance our knowledge, especially of European science and higher education, but at the world level as well. He focuses on research collaboration and social stratification in science, and he picks up many aspects of that from, from institutional hierarchies to professional hierarchies to gender and so on. He publishes vigorously, rigorously, and frequently in journals such as Higher Education, Studies in Higher Education, Scientometrics, Journal of Informetrics, and Journal of Economic Surveys. And in 2019, he published Changing European Academics, a comparative study of social stratification, work patterns, and research productivity. A Routledge book, worth looking out for that book or reading it if you can get access to it through your library. He has many projects. I won't list them all. He's an editorial board member of a number of journals, quite a number, and a very active scholar. I think a credit to our profession and a good example for all of us. Marek, the screen is now yours.
Thank you so much, Simon. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me share the screen now. I'll make it. Yes, I hope it's fine right now. It's fine right now. It's an enormous pleasure to be back. Enormous pleasure and honor and privilege. I'm here for the third time, and every time with a different story. This story is more in progress, so it will be somehow about what I've done, and perhaps even more about what I'm going to be doing in the next probably few years. We will see. So we have globalization, we have science, and we have individual scientists. You can see here on the right the state, and you can see an individual scientist, and this is the tension I will be talking about. In this introduction, I've been studying the academic profession for a decade and more than a decade, and actually for 2 decades on and off. So it's my long-term agenda, individual academics and the academic profession. I was also studying globalization. Some 15 years ago, I wrote the book, University and the State, a study into global transformations, but I never thought about applying globalization to science. I was studying the nation state, the welfare state, generally the public sector, and the impact of them of globalization. So it's not new to me. Anyway, this presentation is more like a future research agenda, and you will realize it soon. So science goes global. Just 2 slides of introduction. Science goes global and scientists go global. Collaboration, readership problems, academic production, everything is increasingly global, and we see it in most countries. At the same time, universities are perhaps most globalized social institutions today. Globalization is the university, and the university is globalization. National science systems in most countries are embedded in emergent global science. The topic of my speech will be emergent global science. What our countries want us to do, and as academics, is to harness global knowledge to national economic needs. And my theme is it's going to be more and more difficult for a number of reasons. And accessing global knowledge can occur only through us, that is scientists. If we don't know to participate in global science exchange, in global knowledge, our states need incentives, and this story will be also about incentives. Consequently, the research power of nations relies on the research power of individual scientists. I'll be coming back to this topic several times. I am focused on individual scientists or their teams, and I'm juxtaposing them to the power of nation states or states in general. So global science is evolving, it's bottom up, it's autonomous, it's self-regulating, its nature is self-regulating, but still it requires deeper understanding. There is just a number of scholars, including Simon Marginson, who really want to understand what global science is about. I'm interested in what drives academic scientists in their work. So I'm interested in the how and the why of their collaboration and publishing decisions. And why scientists collaborate internationally or in any other way. Quote, simply, scientists collaborate because they benefit from doing so. And what are the benefits? The benefits are like promotion, faster promotion, tenure, at all tenure, prestige, or access to research funding, and many more, depending on the country. Science, this global science, is self-organizing networks. And this is what I'm stressing, self-organizing networks. We scientists do increasingly what we want, increasingly with those with whom we want to do what we are doing. So this is self-organization is the key word. Another key word is scientific curiosity, ambition, and still another 2 words not put here is recognition and reputation. So we have curiosity, ambition, reputation, recognition, perhaps prestige also. I'm saying here science, but science means scholarship, science, research. I'm not making any detailed conceptual distinctions here at this point. What drives global science? You can see the scientist on the left. The driver is working with the top scholars in the field. Another driver is curiosity. Still another drivers are reputation and recognition. For what? For works, for publications, and for ideas generally. So there's competition within what we can call economy of reputation or prestige economy. I wrote about it in a paper about top journals, and I had a story here for Simon and for CGHE about top journals and this prestige economy. So this is perhaps crucial. Scientists may be increasingly collaborating as they wish, not everywhere. there is a lot of disclaimers here, but in most countries, in many countries, collaborating as they wish, if they wish, and in the areas they wish. At a massive scale, this is new from a historical perspective. Scientists doing or collaborating wherever with whoever they want. This is new, especially compared to the times prior to 1989 or during the or prior to the collapse of communism. At the same time, what is important, linking global science to national science priorities is very difficult. If top scientists do global, internationalized, collaborative research, it's very difficult to pin down this research to national, local needs, not to mention priorities or national economic competitiveness. It's just very difficult. And I'm not talking about social scientists who are far away from competitiveness. I'm talking about natural scientists. So this is increasingly difficult. This whole story is not about everywhere. It's mostly about affluent democratic systems, mostly about research-intensive universities, not so much about systems with more centrally planned academic activities. So this story is not probably about the whole world, but about an important part of the world. Just a brief, nice pictures. The book Simon was so kind to mention is on the right, but also I will tell you a couple of academic profession stories I produced in the last, say, 2-3 years. So I had, in a sentence, a story about research top performers versus the rest, academic top earners versus the rest, internationalists in research versus the rest, that is locals in research, men collaborating with women, and the men and women collaborating internationally, or men and women not collaborating but doing solo research. All those stories are in those 7 or so papers published in the last, say, two or three years. Now, big data, an important topic to me, academic careers, collaboration, and big data. That's why I told you this is kind of future agenda, what I want to do, what I'm already doing, but not really as we speak. So big data and very large surveys are expected from me, planned with infrastructure already in place, but not done. Probably will be done in the autumn. My theme is that the golden age of social sciences arrived, and it may include higher education research. What I wanted to say perhaps is that when we discuss the academic profession, which is my topic for a decade, with, say, 1,000 Americans in a system of 5 million Americans, it doesn't sound convincing to me, no matter how we squeeze statistics, and no matter what we do with these 1,000 observations. I don't somehow buy it as a social scientist, even though I know the tricks of statistics. So I want somehow higher education, academic profession studies to be introduced into new tools, into new data, certainly with new limitations, and but certainly with new opportunities. So I'm just trying to be working with 100,000 observations rather than 1,000 observations, believing, I will say, a bit more, a bit differently, but also a bit more. So there's a whole ideology of new type of research in social sciences behind what I'm saying here. The changing map of science, it's all you know, certainly. We used to have, a bipolar world of science with Europe and the US. Now we have a tripolar world with Europe, North America, and Asia Pacific, with a number of consequences, mostly for scientific workforce, which is differently located globally. We have different collaborators today, and we see different papers from different parts of the world, and we are surprised. And I will explain it in a moment. Still, the hegemony, Anglo-American hegemony, academic hegemony, is being challenged in many fields, not everywhere, but in many fields. Simon Marginson called it the pluralization of science, and it's a very good expression. No matter what, the global map of science is changing rapidly. Why studying the globalization of science now? This is a critical question. Why now? Probably, to me, but also to many colleagues, the most important factor is availability of digital data on both outputs and inputs. So about funding, about collaboration, about citations, no matter what. And why bibliometrics looks at this data at the level of papers. I'm interested in individuals, scientists, their academic age, their lifetime publications, their lifetime citations, the journals they publish in, and their prestige, etc., etc. So we can take new data and use them for different purposes than basically scientometrics is using them. So we have new data and we have computer power at fingertips, and this is unprecedented. All those things I'm trying to sketch go under different labels. They sometimes are called the science of science, or meta research, or computation social science, or quantitative science studies, which I like perhaps most, or science and technology studies, or much more traditional scientometrics, informatics, or even more traditional economics of science and sociology of science. And my feeling is all those areas or those research agendas can be enormously useful in studying the academic profession, well, in this case, globally. So this data allow us to study the globalization of science itself, globalization and its data applied to science. Now you can see the dollars on the right, and they mean national funding. Global science is nationally funded, and this is enormously important. There's no global science without national funding base. We need infrastructure in our countries running, and we need personnel costs covered, costs that is us. So there's no science, global science, without the nation state. It's important, but there's a lot of new tensions in this. No matter what, universities and scientists are in the center stage today. Just briefly, 2 slides about how global networks in science operate. You can see the pyramid on the right. This is pyramid of university hierarchy. What matters? What matters, what is visible, what has status, is knowledge produced somewhere. It is knowledge produced in world-class universities, which are located mostly in Anglo-Saxon countries, which are published in English. And this knowledge comes mostly from STEM, that is STEM plus medicine disciplines. So highest impact publications come from this specific part of global knowledge production. We know from where, we know about what, and we know in which language. And I wouldn't say it is contestable. And the second slide about operations of global science, what it means that science is an emergent system. It means that its shape depends on us scientists. So we have interdependent, we have individual and decentralized decisions. And these decisions taken by every single individual scientist, taken in millions, basically show the direction of topics, direction of collaboration patterns, direction of publication patterns, etc., etc. And it's very difficult to govern or to steer academic behaviors, that is, steer what we do, how we collaborate, or whether we collaborate or not at all. It's a tricky issue for our governments. What we do is not so much steerable or not so much governable. As Simon put it, and he termed it agency, which is a nice term, researchers fulfill their individual and collective agency by creating knowledge. Knowledge flows freely. Knowledge spreads in all directions. And this is the power of global networks and the power of global science. Well, you can see the amplifying glass on the right to study globalization of science. What we do, every scientist leaves traces in their printed publications. And this is what we used apart from other data types. So our knowledge about globalization of science is based on different sources, data produced at different levels, and the data produced with different methodologies. So I'm using right now in my studies biographical data, administrative data, financial data. I'm also using publications, citations, collaboration patterns, etc., etc. And I'm using a micro level, which is individuals. But we can also study meso level, institutions, macro level, countries, regions, etc. I'm using right now bibliometric data sets and biographical data sets, but I used to be using for a decade interviews and surveys. So there's wide diversity of methodologies to be used in studying globalization of science. We trace years, changes over time. We trace countries, institutions, disciplines, and individuals, whatever we want. In this study presented here today, I'm using the data from 2 decades, 2000, 2020, 4 collaboration types, which is international, national, institutional, and no collaboration or solo research, and all 6 major fields of research. Very briefly, where knowledge is produced globally. Academic knowledge is produced in about 9,000 institutions, but it also comes from corporate, government, medical, and other sectors. But no matter what, the academic sector is the key knowledge producing sector. We can say that corporations produce knowledge, but it's very limited knowledge, or a medical sector produces knowledge, but it's not that large compared with the academic sector. And I'm now coming to the data to play with it a bit. You can see here collaboration and publishing patterns in the past 2 decades. I'll explain it briefly. You have 4 colors, and each color from the top is a different publication or collaboration pattern. First color is institutional collaboration. The second is international. Look how international collaboration is changing in percentages. The total is 100%. So if you add institutional, international, national, and solo, it's 100%. So international is clearly increasing. Institutional is clearly decreasing, and solo is small and decreasing. But this is natural sciences. I will show you in a moment humanities and social sciences, and you will see the vast difference. But this is the big picture. You have the world, you have OECD, and you have 25 biggest countries in terms of knowledge production. Now, humanities and social sciences uniquely, especially humanities, are unique because international collaboration in them is absolutely marginal. You will see it in a second in terms of data. In humanities, solo articles constitute more than 55% in EU, 55% in OECD, and more than half of publications in the US. And you can see it here immediately. Please look at those bottom colors, which is solo research. You have solo research here, basically marginal, basically up to 10% maximum, whichever country you take. And look here at social sciences in top figure and humanities in bottom here. It's solo research everywhere. There's a number of consequences of this divide, but what I'm saying, there's also internal divide between social sciences and humanities. So you can see here that solo research is stable and very powerful, more than 50% of publications in humanities, bottom picture, but it's decreasing rapidly in social sciences, top picture. And the internationalization increases in social sciences, top picture, but is relatively stable in humanities. So my conclusion is social sciences, humanities as a traditional expression is basically losing its traditional sense. There's no more social sciences and humanities because social sciences are like natural sciences with increasing internationalization. And most of us here in this room are social scientists, while humanities are powerfully non-collaborative, clearly non-internationally collaborative, with a number of implications, especially at the individual level, publication citations, when, simply speaking, when humanists are competing with natural scientists, they're almost always losing if it's a direct head-on competition. Because if metrics matters, humanists have to be losing because of a number of publications, a number of citations. But still, when these human stock are combined, unfair results in competitions can be expected. It's important, and I would say it's not discussed in global literature. Very briefly, data studies, just 4 slides, very briefly. What's happening globally right now? You can see it immediately. The green section is national or domestic papers. You see in most countries from the West, the domestic papers in the past 2 decades have been stable. The number is stable. All increase in publications is due to international publications, which is in dark red. And at the same time, in developing countries, you can see growth. Just look at Iran. At Iran here, there's huge growth of domestic papers and huge growth of international papers. So overall, there is more and more national and international papers. In the West, it's just think of Canada, national papers staying stable for 2 decades, and the only increase is attributable to international papers. Differentiation by fields, it's nothing to say except for that it's big. So if you divide this international collaboration by fields, you see enormous differences by field. So there's no science, it's science which should be always disaggregated. Finally, very briefly, USA and China, a big story, depending on the field. If you take all fields combined, USA produces many more publications. But if we look at, say, number 3, which is natural sciences, the number is equal. And if we look at social sciences, USA produces again many more publications. But if you look at impact, so there's a bubble size, like USA big bubble and China small bubble, the impact of USA papers is always in this very general account bigger. But I'm especially interested in the upper 1%, the top 1% of highly cited publications and top 1% of publications, the top 1% of journals. And this is where China is doing enormous progress. China already produces more top publications than the US, and we know it, and this is fine. It's here on the right in top table, but also China will probably overtake the US in the next few years in terms of the number of articles in top 1% journals, which is here in the lower table. So no matter what, China is progressing enormously. I see the reason probably in targeting top journals and targeting publications which can be really highly cited. Where is the gap? Where is the biggest gap is medical sciences, where the US is really the global superpower, and humanities and social sciences. This is not China. Humanities, social sciences are not national priorities, and we can see it in the data. China is far behind the US, but also the UK in terms of humanities, social sciences, etc. Finally, the tensions, and then a bit of conclusions. Global science creates new tensions, and we are not all aware of it. What is true is that developing countries can access the knowledge of developed countries easily, more easily than ever before in the history of science. It's fine, and generally we love it in both parts of the world, which is developing and developed world. But still, apart from win-win collaboration types, which is certainly dominant, there may be also free-riding behavior. And we also know it in developing economies. So many commentators see somehow the end of a global balance in science, possibly the end of a global balance in the academic labor market. So the question is, newcomers from different countries, from new countries in global science can do more for less. It's possible. Then can do different things that are done in the West, because possibly the limitations are much smaller. So this thin balance is maybe somehow destroyed. Also, perhaps most importantly, we are talking about public funding for research in the West. If public funding for research in the West is spent on highly internationally collaborative research globally, what is the argument to keep high public funding at the current levels or higher levels? Let's remember that global science is funded almost exclusively by our nation states. If all results go internationally and globally, and all results or most results cannot be really pinned down to our countries or our nations, this rationale for public funding may be somehow diminished. And this is my problem. It may be diminished. I would say that national governments don't really see it this way. So the rationale presented by national governments may not fit the new reality of globally networked science. So we scientists probably see more. We see the benefits of international science, while governments still believe this is it is national innovation, and this is our competitiveness which matters. But increasingly, there is a tension here. Very briefly, conclusions from these presentations. Three slides of possible lessons. First, we know that it is the researchers rather than national authorities who set the rules of how science is conducted. Again, not everywhere, but basically in the Western world with affluent universities with a lot of public research funding. So we researchers set the rules. This is clear. In this sense, the global science system is self-organized. We are embedded in the rules which we scientists create ourselves, with a lot of implications. At the same time, this global model the global model of science is open. It's an open system. So new opportunities are open to new entrants. New entrants can be new universities, but they can also be new countries. Finally, there can be also new team of scientists. Opportunities are around. What matters are choices made by thousands of scientists. We scientists, or we scholars, shape the evolution of global science. If we collaborate internationally, global science is internationalized. If we collaborate mostly nationally, there is a fighting back, and the national science is again strengthened. We decide more or less. So self-organization and individual autonomy has never been so powerful in the history of science. It's true, but there are some howevers, and I put the sign caution here, or caution ahead. So new tensions emerge if we see that science is increasingly privately governed and self-regulatory. If it's more and more us who decide, the direction is unclear. Scientists also to quote Caroline Wagner, seek to maximize their own welfare. And it's true. We want to maximize our advantage against others, our prestige, our access to funding, our access to postdocs and doctoral students, our academic welfare. We want to maximize it. So this is one of those, however. Finally, to quote Roger King, individual curiosity, scientists satisfy their individual curiosity and the career desire for esteem. And it's again true. All of us want to maximize our reputation or autonomy. We want to see our career desire be satisfied. And it's very private and very non-public or non-national. And the second, so we're talking about autonomy. The second slide before I finished. Networks in science, in this global science, cannot be easily controlled. This is enormously important. We or no one can control global science easily. It can be controlled, but not easily. Networks evolve continuously according to the needs of scientists. Again, not everywhere, but in the affluent Western countries with their affluent universities. So the evolution depends on scientists, but also evolution depends on the incentives. Consequently, this is one of my conclusions. If policymakers want us to go in different directions, they need to find good incentives. So what they need to do, they need to understand what drives academic scientists, that is us, in our work. They need to understand it. They need to understand the mechanisms of academic recognition, which is still the number one driving mechanism in science. And they need to understand that recognition is fragile. Science is not for money, generally. Academic science is not for money. Corporate science may be for money. So it's a very social mechanism, recognition which matters, and not money that matters. And finally, the last slide for today with conclusions. The future of global science is in the hands of millions of scientists, 15 to 20 million, who make individual decisions on whether or not to collaborate, or to collaborate with whom. I did a study of collaboration between men and women. It's interesting that in Poland, for instance, women don't want to collaborate with men. They want to collaborate almost exclusively with women, with men. So what matters? Individual motivations drive scientists to collaborate. And these motivations shape global science. If we understand motivations, we understand global science. Finally, micro-level studies matter. And this is the last sentence, Marek in the next few years, or what Marek wants to do. Huge global surveys, it's new. I did surveys for a decade, but they were not global. Data sets integration with biographical data, administrative data, publishing data, citation data, etc., etc. I'm doing preparatory studies right now. What you have seen are just preparatory studies to global studies about Poland or about highly cited researchers. I have a population of 10,000 highly cited researchers, and I do a deep study of them. It's interesting, but it's not published yet. No matter what, the global academic profession studies have a fascinating future. And this is my conclusion, fascinating future, as long as we go from 1,000 perhaps to 100,000, or as long as we use new opportunities and new data. Thank you so much. I just wanted to mention that my presentation is based on the paper which I wrote for at the invitation of Paula Mattei from Milano. Thank you, Paula, so much. I know you are here today. Thanks so much. You made me think and you made me work, well, for a couple of months basically, but I'm glad I finished it. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, I'm open to answer. I'm stopping sharing the screen right now, Simon.
Well done, Marek. I entirely agree with your picture. I mean, I've independently of you, although with some communication between us, I've been working away as well, and not coming at it from the scientific point of view, more from the kind of social theory side. But I mean, I think your picture, your empirical picture, is entirely right. That global science has evolved as this remarkable self-regulated network of scientists, groups, and individuals connecting constantly with each other, and driven by this combination of cognitive objectives and professional and objectives. So there's truth in all of the arguments, I think, to some extent, about motivation and drivers. Preferential attachment is one thing, with people's curiosity is another. Their excitement about new discoveries and wanting to be part of that, and their need to make a career, make a life, make an income. All those things are all also at play. And I think you're right about status being more important than revenue and so on. I mean, what's really interesting is the way that people still understand science as predominantly driven by national governments, a kind of function of national policy and funding alone. And although that's a crucial condition, you've rightly shown that it's not actually what ties this network together, and the network has its own momentum and its own development, its own very rapid development in the manner of a network. And yet, I think there's still an assumption that it's all a byproduct of what nations do, and within the national container, that's how it looks. That the global activities are sort of off the edge of what the real agenda, which is national. But I think your picture is exactly right. It's not that; it's globally driven. That's predominant, and so on. And I think Carolyn Wagner helped us all understand that as well. So I think the picture is really right. But what's intriguing is how it's arisen, and how long it's lasted without question, at national level. That's remarkable, isn't it? And we're all worried that we'll reach the end of that period, and we're already in this sort of China-America stuff. We're seeing the signs of a more assertive national presence with the potential to disrupt the global conversation, but it hasn't really happened quite yet. I've been thinking about the origins of the global system, and I think we can trace a lot back to the internet and, the way in which it made possible networking and so on. But I think one of the clues to it is that the internet initially, in the very early 90s, and I came into academic life in 1991, just as it was beginning to appear, was dominated by American universities in the first instance. So it was dominated by, as the science developed through the internet, which it did so rapidly in the first half of the 90s, it developed through the American scientific profession, and reflected the mores, the values, the life habits of American academic faculty, so that, self-regulation, some distance from the state, professional association, friendship-driven, all those sorts of things, that sort of autonomous independent science was the American style. And I think that really did set the frame in a lot of ways for the global, because the other countries coming into the scientists from elsewhere coming into the network behaved in much the same way as the Americans did. And so it is, I think that's helped global science to evolve in this very autonomous, self-regulatory manner. It's been, and I think it's been very healthy in that sense. I mean, it's also, of course, helped ensure that it's been an Anglo-American system. With the American deep belief that we're superior and we know best and so on. And maybe the UK's got a few things to say, but maybe the Canadians might occasionally be right. But basically, most of the knowledge comes from us. And with difficulty, Americans have started to open up much more to other parts of the world, but that's taken a while. And I think that helps explain, why Europeans and others have tolerated for so long this total English language domination of science, because we now have the translation tools to publish in multiple languages in leading journals. If that's what we want to do, we could be doing that now. And there's been no real pressure to do that. And I think it's, again, reflects the cultural character of the system as it's evolved. I've just got a couple of questions for you. One is this intriguing point you made about the humanities and the social sciences. I'm sure you're right about them parting company to some extent, evolving in different ways. I wonder if you had an explanation for that. Any thoughts about why the social sciences have gone closer to the natural sciences? We can see why the humanities remain national, but why have the social sciences evolved as they have? Do you think there is any prospect of opening up the global science system linguistically to other languages? Those two questions.
Okay, fantastic questions. Just first returning to your initial idea, we may be living in fantastic times and happy times in terms of self-regulatory nature of science, but it may not be always so. So we need to be very careful. Politics matters. Politics in 1989 opened science to global collaboration, basically, and politics can always stop or somehow slow down the growth of science in global terms. So we have to be very careful and look around. It's not guaranteed forever. This is my comment to your reflection. Now, humanities and social sciences, and why? Please remember, we are talking only in this data about humanities and social sciences in Scopus. So international, mostly in English. And even there, humanities are predominantly solo research. So it's not an issue of writing in English, because almost everything in English is in Scopus is in English. It's an issue of disciplinary feature of humanities, which is still solo research and solo writing. And by the way, credit going to solo authors. Simon is a basically solo author. He writes a lot, but he also, his top stuff is solo. His books are solo. I'm also a solo writer, as if I were a humanist. So solo is appealing to some people in humanities and in social sciences, but much less in social sciences. And it doesn't matter whether or Scopus. The next question, Simon, was first was social science and humanities.
Languages.
Yes, languages. I know it's enormously important to you. I know your papers about, okay, let's have everything in several languages. It's technically easy. We have DeepL, artificial intelligence doing translations. We just correct it a bit, and we have it in any language we want. But still, I strongly believe. I know that Simon has a different opinion. I strongly believe in global science, especially science. Maybe not so much scholarship, but science in English. This is not a bad idea to keep everything in one strictly defined language rather than have 100 languages and get it translated. So I like it for humanity, Simon. I like it for social sciences, but in strict science, exact sciences, I'm for one global library in English. Okay.
Yeah, and I think there are compelling arguments for doing that. I understand that. And when you look at those mathematical papers, those short mathematical papers with lots of formulae, it does seem easy, doesn't it, compared to some other disciplines. Now we've got, in the manner of these webinars, people are flooding in now, and we'll take Paolo Mattei first, and then Ryan Allen and Shona Wang in that order. I should warn you, Marek, we might get to the stage later in the webinar when we need to bring in 2 or 3 questions at once for you to listen to before you respond. But at this stage, we'll just take a one-to-one basis. Paolo Matte. Paolo, please do join us. There he is. I can see his name there. Ask to unmute, it says. Paolo, we can't hear you. No. I might just check Paolo's question for you, Mark. It's in the chat. He's going to ask you, he's asking you about the EU, in that which you've written about, of course, in the past. How do you see the role of regional institutions such as the European Union at the supranational level? I mean, how does this scale shape research funding?
Yeah, very briefly. The fact that Europe is a global superpower right now in totality is related to huge, massive collaboration funding, billions of euros poured into collaborative research across Europe, across 15 and now 28 countries. I strongly believe in public funding, and Europe is a perfect regional example that when you pour in billions, your results are enormous. I didn't believe in international projects for a long time, funded by the EU, but the more money you see around, the better results you see. And if you treat Europe as a country, you can compare it to the US as a country. So the results are somehow comparable.
Thanks, Mark. Ryan Allen, can you come in, please?
Sure. Thank you, Simon. I had a question about the open access movement and its influence on global science. We're seeing people trying to push back against the big for-profit publishers. You mentioned that science is sort of a humanistic thing, but Elsevier and these other companies are making quite a lot of money, and that's often where we're finding those sort of elite top journals. But even in the open access movement, we're seeing goal open access with fees that authors have to pay, so creating sort of another divide. So I'm curious what you think the influence will be, or sort of where we're going with open access.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I'm pretty orthodox in thinking about open science. I'm inclined to think about publishing in terms of prestige. So you have prestigious journals, less prestigious journals, and no prestigious journals. And what I'm always suggesting is thinking about the journals not in terms of how open they are, but where they are located in this hierarchies. This is important for all of us, like Simon or me or whoever, but also important for my PhD students or my postdocs. It's just enormously important. So I wouldn't believe that much in the power of openness per se. I know we pay billions for open access in top journals, but still I would always suggest top journals rather than any other journal, because I see the citations potential. I see who is reading what and who is not reading what. So this is my answer is pretty orthodox. I'm generally against opening everything because it ruins prestige.
Thanks, Mark. Shona Wang. Shona, you're next.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Professor Kwiek. I'm a doctoral student at University of Oxford, and I've been following your research for a long time, and thank you for your presentation today. Well, my question is related to the method. I really agree with that the bibliometrics data could contribute to our understanding of the collaboration from different levels. But when touching upon like individual scientists collaboration, I feel there are some limitations among this big data. So I'm wondering, how do you think that those big data could help us to understand the collaboration at the individual level? As you have also mentioned for your future research, I would like to hear more about that, especially some of the driven forces, such as the individual curiosity or the self-organization, individual autonomy. Do you think this kind of factors could also be described through the big data? Well, I would also like to know how you think that among scientists that this data could help in creating this kind of collaborative relationship among the individual scientists. Yes, that's
Yes, that's a great question, which gives me a possibility to talk about, for a moment, about the research agenda which I'm using right now. Certainly, what I presented are aggregated data from Cyber and Scopus, which is available to everyone. It doesn't make big difference. Everyone can download it and do it. What I'm interested is basically bibliometric data at the micro level of individuals. So I can have everyone, and I have age or academic age for everyone. I have publications over the years, lifetime for everyone. I have the prestige journals or less prestigious journals or journal type for everyone. I can also have collaboration by country or by institution or by gender at the micro level of individuals. So basically, what I'm doing, even though I can show it to you right now, because the population is Poland, the whole Poland, I'm using bibliographic data combined with bibliometric data and administrative data. So I can have gender for say 100,000 Poles, yeah? All scientists, gender for everyone, age, real biological age for everyone, publication, citations, blah, 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 for everyone. This is the power of big data. And if we want to know what drives you, we have to do global survey. We'll never have these answers from bibliometric data. We need to have a survey, 2 million people globally. Why do you collaborate? Why you don't collaborate? What are your drivers? Blah, blah, blah. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes survey. And that's what I'm trying to do this autumn. Without not saying too much, it's just my agenda. So we can answer these questions either through large surveys, global surveys, or through bibliometrics combined with biographies.
So you have been warned, folks. You can expect some surveys to arrive in your email in the not too distant future. And do help Marek with his research by returning those surveys to him promptly. Paolo Mate apologizes, Marek. He's lost the connection when he was due to come in. That's what happened. And I've told Paolo that if he wants to indicate, he can indicate a desire to come in anyway later on. Our next question comes from Soyoung Lee. Soyoung.
Thank you, Simon. And thank you, Marek, for your wonderful presentation. It's my third time to see your presentations. It's always wonderful. So my question is, my question is about this individual agency in global science. And you said that one of the questions of the self-regulatory global science is that researchers use their knowledge and act for their own private goods rather than public and national values. And what do you think is the ideal state of this self-regulatory and autonomous global science? Researchers using their agency for the public value. Do you think that's the ideal global science autonomy? And my other question is, you also mentioned that to the extent that we understand the individual motivation of the researchers, we understand the system of global science. And I was wondering how much we know at the moment about the individual motivation of these researchers, and what do we need to more, further in the future? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. The issue of agency is important. If we take the agency too far, we can somehow lose this idea of public nature of science and public nature of scholarship. So there's a big tension between individuals and the state or the public good or global public good or whatever on the other side. We have individual scientists and we love the current state of affairs, but still there is this tension and this caution note, which I mentioned. What is the ideal? The ideal is to harness us scientists to global public goods somehow with proper incentives. If we are not incentivized properly, we can go private in terms of motivations or in terms of publications or interest. So there is big tension, but there are solutions. Solutions lie in incentives. And finally, this individual motivation, how much do we know? We know motivation from small-scale studies in sociology of science. We ask in surveys and we know it. We do interviews and we know it. We can't get it from any hard data like bibliometric or administrative or biographical data. So no matter what we want to do, we have to ask people, talk to them, or do surveys with them. Our state of knowledge is rather limited. So we have big pictures. Let's suppose this big idea of of self-generation of science and all those big autonomy issues. We don't know it from exact data. We know it from small scale studies, and we generalize them to the global level. We generalize them to many nations, countries, disciplines, etc., etc. We know it small scale, and we talk large scale. So my idea is probably to have bigger scale data to say the same, or maybe something else, but with more, I would call it empirical support.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks, Marek. Now, Marek, I'm now going to bring in more than one question. I'm going to ask you one myself. My one is simple. It follows Ryan Allen a bit, and it's: do you think the publishing companies and the bibliometric companies, which is with Elsevier is the same, of course, are they getting more power in relation to scientists than they had before? Where's that going? That's my question. Second question is from Simon Baker, and the third will be from David Mills. Simon, can you come in, please?
Marek, thanks for allowing a question from a journalist. My question is similar to the previous question, actually. I'm fascinated by this point you made about the tension between
we can't hear you, Simon. It's too.
I'm sorry, Simon. Start again, I think. Just give it one more shot. We can't hear you very well.
Is that?
Yes, that's better. Keep close to the microphone.
Okay, yeah, hang on. I'm going to try something here.
We haven't got much time though, so.
You should be able to hear me a lot better now, I think.
That's
perfect.
Good.
Yeah. So, I was fascinated by your point about the tension between globalized science and national funding, really, and how that's increased. It's very similar to the kind of tension between globalization commercially as well and national governments. How can that kind of really be best resolved? It's do you think it should move towards, we should have more international funding such as Horizon Europe, or do you think we should try and align science more with democratic priorities in different nations somehow?
Yeah.
Hey, before you fire off on those two questions, Marek, we'll bring in David Mills as well. David, you've got the third question.
Sorry, Marek, you got far too much to think about here, but I'm going to add a couple more. So obviously, fascinating presentation. My worry, of course, is that you are reliant at this point on the bibliometric data, and so the question really was about humanities. And you don't necessarily need to publish with other people in order to collaborate. You can read and you can learn and you can get together and you can conference and you can network without publishing together. So your story about the humanities being an unglobalized community possibly could be questioned.
Okay, Marek, those three questions for you.
Okay, perfect. First, are the big companies getting more power? Yes and no. Let's remember what we think about journals. Journals are us. We are here editors, we are here reviewers, we do all the dirty and beautiful jobs for companies. If I look at our area, higher education research, it's absolutely autonomous what we do, what we editors and what we reviewers do. If I do the area bibliometrics, it's more or less the same. So we have the power. Money is a different issue. Nobody pays us and companies make big money, which is a problem. But the power is with us. Again, individual scientists, we are the gatekeepers. Now, the tension about national funding and global science. I studied and I had a slide about global funding of science. Corporate science is globally funding, and Gates is funding global science. And there's a number of areas in which global funding appears. But still, I believe real funding for research is national. Universities are nationally funded, and we scientists are nationally bound forever. I don't want global salary. I want my national salary so that it comes every last day of the month. So the only answer to this issue is, again, find incentives on the part of countries and states to make us scientists more relevant nationally. If we are somehow nationally relevant, we get paid. If our universities are nationally relevant, they get paid. If they are not nationally relevant in the long run, which is, I know, 10, 15 years, we are all gone. Science is global, but then we scientists are gone. We are unfunded, which I can't accept. And finally, about humanities, it's a great point. I wouldn't say humanists are not collaborating. Humanists are just having a different publishing pattern. Solo research rules. More than 50% is solo research. I wanted to draw your attention to implications. If you write solo, your publication numbers are small because it's one publication, one. And for social sciences, 3 publications, 9 or whatever. Fractional counting makes wonders. And in terms of citations, solo research is the least of the worst cited research. So finally, if you have in a panel social scientists and humanists, and it's social sciences and humanities panel in grad funding, and the assessors see small number of publications and small number of citations, humanist, and a fantastic guy from social scientists with number, sometimes dozens or hundreds of publications in social sciences, and thousands of citations, what they will do if they are metrics inclined, they will choose the social scientists. This is the implication, negative, impacting humanities in the future. And that was my only point, David.
No, then that's why you don't want too many bibliometricians on your selection panels, do you? But yes, good point,
Yes,
thank you.
That's true.
Now, in our time-honoured fashion, Marek, we'll go to 3:05 and then stop in UK time, that is. So that allows me to bring in the 2 people that haven't yet been able to join us, Victorita and Haba Ruima Baptiste. So can we bring you in, Victorita, first? Hello, Victorita. Are you there?
Hello. Thank you, Simon. Congratulations, Marek, for your presentation. My question is very simply, how to making minds for this brilliant future of higher education?
Now, while you're thinking about that, Marek, I'll bring in the second question, which is Haba Rumima Baptiste. Are you there, please? Do we have a connection? Maybe not. I'll see if I can find that question while you answer Victorita, Marek.
Yes, okay. The brilliant future of higher education. I would say I'm always making a distinction between higher education and science and scholarship. We have millions of lecturers and teachers, and only hundreds of thousands of scientists and scholars who published. And there's a difference between those demand absorbing universities, which are 80% of universities globally, and those research intensive universities with scientists and scholars who do research, which are 20% of universities. I did a story not presented here about this bifurcation, demand absorbing millions and people, of scholars, of students, and small scale, small sector of research intensive universities, maybe 5%, maybe exactly this 1,000 I was talking about. So this is not brilliant future for everyone and for all type of universities. I would say it's brilliant future for, research universities and us scholars working in them.
And I've unearthed
Thank you very much.
Haba Rurima's question in the chat, Marek, and it was about humanities, and you've answered it partly already, but he does make the point that it's important to support the humanities because it provides soft knowledge that are fundamental for critical thinking capacity.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I'm absolutely for humanities. I'm political philosopher by training. I spent 10 years in political philosophy, all my studies and PhD and even habilitation 2 decades ago, but still. So I'm absolutely for humanities and the power of critical reason in any area, also in higher education research. So yeah, absolutely yes.
Marek, I think we've reached the end of our question list, and we've perhaps reached the end of our webinar. So I want to thank you for giving us a third webinar, which was quite different to the other 2, as the second was to the first. And you are such a productive researcher, such an original and productive person that you're able to generate new papers every few months, and it's terrific. Really appreciate your contribution.
Years.
Yeah, no, look, it's your work program, it seems to me, is very productive for all of us. We're all enjoying and learning from you. So let's have you back on again. Colleagues, your next opportunity will be to touch base with Amal Kumar, whom you haven't met before on the webinar. Amal is a postdoc fellow at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, and he's looking at the development of Californian higher education, something which we return to every so often in higher education studies, always a bit of a litmus in relation to where things are going in the United States, and that often means globally still. So do tune in to an important emerging researcher, Amal Kumar, very likable, I think, presenter as well. You'll enjoy that webinar on Thursday, and we look forward to seeing everyone then. And we look forward to having you back on again, Marek. Thank you again for a great day's work.
Thank you so much. It was my great pleasure. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Bye for now.